everyone! So in today's video, I wanted to go over a list that I started back in spring of this year of all of the weird things that seem to happen this garden season. Now, I thought it'd be interesting, that's why I collected them kind of as things happened throughout 2022, and I wanted to see if you experienced any of this. I'm sure those of you who are near me, which is Chicago, Zone 6A, probably experienced some of these things too. And I also want to save this because I want to see if next year a lot of these same things happened or if it just seemed like a one-off. So the first thing on my list is that we never had what felt like a real spring this year. And what I mean by real spring is days where it was kind of in the 50s, maybe low 60s. We went from like 40 and very rainy to 70 degrees, and there wasn't much in between. And I know it wasn't just a feeling, I actually saw it in my crops too, because this was the first year I wasn't able to actually grow radishes in the spring. I planted them, and it typically takes 30 days from sowing the seed to them being ready to harvest, but because it was so cold for so long, the seeds took much longer to actually sprout, and then by the time they were growing, it was 70 degrees. And so knowing that I couldn't even get radishes is a signal to me that it was a very abnormal spring. Fall has been much better. We've been consistently in the 50 and 60 degree days, so I've already had one harvest of radishes, and I have another one that's already growing. But it was really sad in the spring because radishes are really the first crop that I grow that kind of gets me excited for the year ahead, and it just did not work out. I did have a lot of radish greens though, so let me know if your spring was abnormal this year or if it was just near Chicago. Next on my list is still related to the spring, but it's that we had so much rain this spring that damaged a lot of my plants. Now, I don't know if it was that we got more volume of rain than normal, or if it was the combination of it being so cold for so long that the rain didn't really have time to dry between the next rainfall. It just kept things consistently moist. And this was the first spring that I've lost so many plants due to the soil in the pots being too moist and causing the things to rot. So I lost almost all of my bulbs that were growing in smaller pots, and by small I mean pots that are like 10 inches or less in diameter. Everything in the raised bed was fine, but the smaller pots really lost a lot of plants there due to the too much moisture in the soil. So bulbs, I had some perennials that died of root rot as well. So I've never experienced that before. I've maybe lost like a plant or two before, but not kind of at the scale of what I lost this past spring. So for me, what I'm going to do is if I plant bulbs in smaller containers, which I'm not sure of yet, I'm either going to put them in the greenhouse or I'm going to shove them underneath the raised bed. Even though some water does drip down from the raised beds, not as much as does outside of the raised bed. So usually when it rains, the area under the raised bed is pretty dry, so I might just shove some pots under there. But I think if it had been warmer in the spring, the root rot wouldn't have been as much of an issue. Now with me, continuing to talk about the weather, we had hotter than normal days in June. So again, it was super cold spring, jumping straight into 70 degrees, and then we had days that were in the 100-degree temps in June, which is not normal at all. We will get some 100-degree days in like July and August, but that early in the season was not expected, and my plants were very confused, especially, unfortunately, my hydrangeas. So whereas I can usually keep the hydrangeas up here in the sun during like May and June, and then I move them to full shade like July, August, they got hit really hard with the sun in June. I even moved them into the shade earlier than I normally do, and things just got really burnt, really crispy. They were not happy, and they never really recovered the rest of the year. So I'm going to overwinter them this year, kind of see what it looks like when they come back next year, and then keep them on this side of the deck. But yeah, it got super hot, super fast, and then hotter than normal much earlier in the year. So my plants were much younger, much more tender when we had the 100-degree days than they normally were. So that is something that I don't know if it's going to be normal going forward now, where we're going to have that more erratic weather, and if so, am I going to have to put things in place to kind of counteract that? So I know there's some like plant shade, like things you stick in the ground and it's a circle and it provides some shade to them. I might need to invest in some of those. I might need to look for just other ways to get some shade up here, protect things from moisture, so we'll kind of see. But it's definitely interesting when you're gardening every year to kind of see what's changing, what's staying the same, and if the things that are changing are going to be kind of constants going on in the future. So we'll see what 2023 holds compared to 2022. Next up on my list are wasps. Now we had so many wasps this year, more than ever before. We usually have like, I don't know, a handful of wasps with the bees and other pollinators, but this was like full-on wasps from very early on in the season. It did start to die down a little bit, I'd say kind of late August, early September, but for a while there, wasps were the only pollinators that I saw in the garden. And as much as I respect all pollinators, if I was going to choose the pollinators for my garden, it wouldn't be the wasps. Now I know some of them are more docile, but some of them definitely aren't, and I had a few kind of chasing me around the garden. So I did try to garden at the off pollinating hours, which were early in the morning, later in the evening, which worked out well anyways because that's when it wasn't 100 degrees outside. But there were just wasps everywhere. And what kind of made that a little bit sad was that there really wasn't anything else until maybe halfway later in the season. So I didn't have a lot of bumblebees, honeybees, barely had any butterflies. We did get some swallowtail caterpillars that the wasps ate right in front of me, so that was not fun, but it was just like almost 100% wasps. So it was just a very interesting year as far as the pollinators and who chose to come to my garden. I would say though, by the end of August, early September, it was mostly the bumblebees and the butterflies that were back in the garden, but that was definitely something strange. And it was so strange that I, one, asked other people on Instagram, and a lot of them saw the same thing. And then I also found some articles, but they're not tied to Chicago, but it did say that in 2022 it was the year of the wasp in France. So I guess there were a lot of wasps. Let me know if you had more wasps than normal in your garden this year. I did keep regularly checking too for nests, like under everything, just in case, because I don't want to surprise a wasp's nest. I've never been stung, so that's part of it too. I want to continue that track of never being stung. Next on my list is that I saw fewer caterpillars and hornworms overall, and that goes hand in hand with the increase in wasps, because wasps feed on caterpillars and hornworms, again, right in front of me. So they will eat both the ones that you do and the ones that you do not want in your garden. So not only do they eat the swallowtails, and I tried to protect the plant with the caterpillars with a net, they got right underneath it. I have a plan for this next year though. And then the hornworms, which I usually see on my tomato plants probably in July. I only saw one this year that got, no, that's a lie. I saw two this year that got to full size. One of them had the wasp eggs hanging out of it, so the wasp had gotten to that one later on. And then the other one was fine, and I moved it over to the back deck, and I don't know where it went now. Maybe it was eaten by a bird, maybe it crawled under the deck to make a cocoon. I'm not sure, but either way, I think the wasps definitely helped keep the hornworms under control on my tomato plants, because usually I'll see the smaller caterpillars and then I'll have larger ones, like maybe 4 or 5 that make it to that size, and like I said, I only saw 2 total this year. And kind of on that same track, I had fewer pests than normal overall this year. I think I had aphids on my aronia berry, and that was it. I usually get them on my zinnias. I didn't see any on my zinnias this year. What other ones? Usually I get a lot of the cucumber beetles. I didn't really have that many. I have some that kind of get on my dahlias, but again, not as many as I've seen in the past. What I did see though, that I've never seen before, are slugs. And I always assumed that since slugs can't fly, they won't make their way up here, so I'm thinking I must have brought them in on a plant from a garden center, but I found one in one of the fall plants. Was it one of the pansies? And then I found another one, I think somewhere over near my tomato plant. So I don't know if slugs are now going to be an issue for me in the garden. I'm hoping they are not. I did dispose of the 2 that I found, but you know, when you find 2, it probably means there's a lot more hiding around somewhere. So we'll kind of see what happens next year, but slugs is not something that I was looking forward to having to control in my garden. Now, another thing that I really didn't experience a lot of this year is powdery mildew, which was very surprising to me, especially because of how much rain we got. And typically if we get a lot of rain kind of overhead, that leads to the powdery mildew. I mean, there was some on the hydrangeas, but I removed those leaves and that really didn't come back. Didn't have any issues on my zinnias this year, and we usually get some, if not earlier in the season, later in the season, and again, just absolutely nothing. So that was really exciting to not have to deal with that. I actually didn't spray a lot of my kind of fungicide that I do have, which I had to use a lot of that last year. So it's all just been interesting, kind of seeing how things have changed year over year. And these were things that were abnormal from the last 3 years of gardening. So since 2019, 2020, 2021, these were things that really I just noticed for the first time this year in 2022. So let me know if you experienced any of these, or if there were other weird things that kind of seemed out of the norm in your garden this year. And then we'll see what 2023 brings. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.